Before we get started, how many of you here are familiar with Juju enough to know what it is and do stuff with it? Okay, how many of you have no idea what Juju is, or a vague idea? You just showed up and everyone's talking about it and you're like, dude, I better go to a session and find out what it is? Okay, good. And how many of you are like deep Juju experts?
Keys, working.
I think Case is probably the closest one to that. Okay, good. So this is going to be the getting started Juju thing. First, a little bit about myself. My name is George. I've been working at Canonical for almost 5 years, starting in September, because I'm getting old. Before that, I did system administration at a university, so I was what I would call an old school person that had lamp stacks, and I would SSH in a for loop. And then one day I found this thing called Puppet, and I thought it was the greatest thing ever. And then I started at Canonical, and I started doing community things and some client things, and I totally missed the entire cloud revolution. And then I found out about this Juju thing and started working on it. So the whole concept to me of manually handling instances and things like that is actually pretty funny, because my favorite interaction with the cloud is already Juju. So I'm kind of spoiled in that regard. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how Juju works. I'm going to give it to you by example, because sort of like at depth, the best way to do it is show you by example. And then I have some opinions on the charm server that some consider pretty strong. But we can talk about that and then questions. So I have different sections of examples, and maybe I'll take questions afterwards on each section, and then we can move on. So this session is basically for you. So if you feel that you're not quite getting it, just let me know, and then we have plenty of expertise here. If at any time after this you want to help get started with Juju with like more of a tutor-based, I need help, I've got questions, I've got scripts I would like to shut your pie hole. I've got scripts that I need to modify to charms. Room 205 from now until the end of UDS, it's filled with these charmers up here, it's filled with Juju core dev. We'd be more than happy to help you get started. So this is conceptual stuff here. So, the most common question I usually get about Juju is, how's this different from Puppet? How's this different from Chef? And it comes down to this basic question. Juju manages services, not machines. So configuration management with Puppet is basically, I have a DNS server, the file should look like this, the NTP configuration file should look like this should be that. And then you codify what you need in Puppet, and you basically say, I want this server to look like this. And the Puppet master makes sure that that machine always looks like that. The thing that makes Juju different is that you don't do that at the machine level anymore. You do that at the service level. So instead of saying, I want this machine to have these LDAP configs, blah, 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 we say, I want LDAP to look like this. Then you don't care about machines. Unless you want to care about machines. Because when you don't care about machines, you can scale really fast and you're really elastic. So this is how we consider, this is like, it all started with bare metal. Like we would sit there racking things with like, remember Snap-on Rails came out, it was like the greatest thing ever. And then someone figured out virtualization, which was awesome, because you could do like consolidate a bunch of things onto one server and get like the most bang for the buck. Then cloud computing came along and showed us that you can be elastic, and the concept of the way to be awesome now is, can you get 10,000 servers up of something running? That's the kind of scale we're talking about. And when you get to that level of scale, you need something called configuration management, which is basically helps you manage all those thousands of machines with the exact config that you want. We see service orchestration as the next evolution of this. It still depends on all of these things, but it's a more higher level thing where you say, I just want WordPress, and I don't really want to care about all this other stuff anymore. Just like I don't really care about bare metal anymore. My provider cares about the bare metal. And then of course someday we'll invent Skynet and we'll all be killed by the things we create.
We don't invent it.
So I'm going to give you a quick example. So this is Hadoop. And let me show you the instructions. So you go to these cloud conferences or these things, like your boss goes and he comes back and he's like, man, these are the 15 different things that you want to try. So he comes back with, I want you to try Hadoop. And then you're like, sure, boss. Let me get started. So you find hardware, or in the educational field, you borrow hardware from another department because engineering never gets money, but that's a different story. So first thing you do is I Google for how do I install Hadoop? And here I am. Okay, how many times have you seen this before? So, you know, I can download stuff, there's links. I already have startup scripts here. Links to bugs that I might want to avoid. No problem. Easy enough. Download it, get started. Maybe I go buy the O'Reilly Hadoop book or something. Now I have configuration files that I have to care about. Remember we were talking about master nodes and slave nodes, so there's like configuration that you have to do, right? Next thing I know, I'm not even on the second page and I'm hand editing XML files, which sounds like the greatest thing ever. Then I want to figure out exactly the configuration that I want and environment settings, and I'm trying to write all this, and here I am in XML files and data path settings and all this kind of stuff. And I'm already on page 5, right? I don't know how many of you have seen the Hadoop books, but like the first half is getting it up and running. So, well, that's really awesome, right? Your boss is coming back, so how are we doing on this Hadoop thing? And you're obviously saying, yeah, I'm learning a lot of things about it and stuff, but what are you really doing? You're doing meta work, right? To try to get the thing up and running. And by the time you really get the expertise of it, you're wasting time doing meta work instead of getting started. What if you could just skip to chapter 5 of that book and say, here's how you get started, pretend it's up and running. So this is oh wow, and even another page, great. So this is the typical problem that we're trying to solve. And I've actually learned this morning that the Hadoop guys now have all this codified in Puppet recipes, which we can consume in terms as well. So I have a great idea, right? Once you learn the concept of Hadoop, you know there's like master and it has a bunch of slaves. So why don't we just say Juju deploy Hadoop in a Hadoop master, and then Juju deploy Hadoop in a slave cluster. And then all of that stuff just magically happens. 2 instances fire up either on Amazon, your local machine, or EC2, and things just start happening. That's because Juju manages services, not machines. I'm going to talk about this a lot, and when we get to scaling, you'll see why managing the service is a lot better than managing the machine. And why is that there then? I don't know. So then we need to add the relations. So this is the magic here. We have 2 separate instances. One's a master, one's a slave. They don't really know how to talk to each other. So you say, let's make a name node talk to the data node on the slave cluster. Let's make the master job tracker talk to the slave cluster task tracker. And then those hooks and all of that configuration and stuff that you're doing is just happening. This is why managing services instead of machines is awesome. So once the slave knows how to talk to the master, there's absolutely no reason that you can't do this. You can't just say, I want 20 more. And since we manage the relationship and not the machine, you can horizontally scale as much or as little as you want, unless Amazon tells you you can't. So that's an example with Hadoop. Depending on the charm author, we can add things on top of other things like Lego blocks. So you guys saw Marco's thing this afternoon where he said, I want the upstream PHP admin. What if we could just say, Juju deploy mod speedy, like Google's Apache module for speedy. And oh boy.
New really. Jill says what?
Hold on, I've been big at this before.
Somebody don't know how to close their email client.
Oh.
That's awesome.
Okay, good. I want a divorce. Actually, I came over here, she's like, that stupid XBMC broke again, we're getting cable. So I'm really upset. So what if we could just take something called mod speedy that you see on Hacker News that day, hey, this is supposed to be pretty cool. Let me deploy it, I add the relation, and then I hit F5 like Marco did, except you're serving over speedy instead of HTTP. It's pretty cool. What if you could just kind of Lego brick different combinations of things? Maybe you don't want Apache, maybe you want Nginx. So just swap them out, add the relation, and you're good to go. How can that possibly work? Because the idea is a community of expertise, not just packages. You can use as little as much as you want, in whatever language you want. We don't, some are Bash, some are Python.
Some are PHP.
Yeah, some are PHP. They're easy to share, easy to hack on, like the store is built in, the store has PPAs. basically built in, so that you can say, here's my crazy way to deploy MySQL. Juju deploy squiggly George, / George just creates MySQL charm go deploy. And we are building in the lightweight contribution process so that if you want to fork stuff and put it in there, we want to make that social and really easy. So the Juju Charm Store has a web interface. And most of you are 90% there. I tell people that script you've been carrying around in Perl that you've has slowly over time become the way to deploy Postgres or whatever that is. That is basically what a charm does. It fires off an instance, you have root on it, do whatever unholy things you need to do to make it work. So, I've talked about Hadoop. That might be complicated for some of you because I've actually deployed lots of Hadoop clusters, but I don't have any idea how to actually use Hadoop, which is funny because there's a lot of people, smart people out there that know how to use Hadoop, but can't configure Hadoop. So I figure we'll meet in the middle, and that'll be okay. So let's move something into the cloud. WordPress, this is an easy one, right? Who isn't familiar with LAMP stack things? Okay. Oh yeah, he's like OpenGL Ninja over there. So Joey from OMG was doing a server move. He had a co-located thing, and he wanted to move to a new host, and had this vision of Keystone hops with the server bouncing out the back. Gets to his new web host, plugs it in, and this is what his website was actually saying when he plugged it in. And Apache totally lies to us here. It works,
It said that
which is basically means I'm going to embarrass you in front of all your peers. So he posted on Google, he goes, it's official. I literally have no clue what I'm doing. I basically said, you have your data. We can totally put this on AWS right now.
When did a Sunday?
So this was on St. Patrick's Day on a Saturday. And I said, Marco, what are you doing tonight? We can probably do this in an hour. Okay, so here's what I did. I did Juju Bootstrap. That kind of gets us started. That looks at your credentials. You have your EC2 creds in a little text file. It basically says, I'm ready to get started. I knew I wanted to horizontally scale, so I wanted an HA proxy ahead of WordPress. So I said, Juju deploy HA proxy, MySQL, WordPress, bam, automatically 3 instances just fire up. I don't care about AMIs, I don't care about browse, I don't care about installing unit tools or any of that stuff. This is just what I want. And then I added the relations. So here, Juju add relation MySQL WordPress. This basically says MySQL WordPress, you guys need to be buddies. And hooks fire off for these relations.
Does the order matter?
No, it does not. It's asynchronous.
And you don't have to wait either.
Yeah, you can just keep typing.
There's
Right.
lag,
Right. Because by the time the bootstrap probably takes, 5 minutes on EC2.
Possibly.
Yeah. So these hooks are basically doing things that you would normally do: setting up your virtual host, creating the database, putting all the stuff that is in step 4 of how to install WordPress. And then we know we want WordPress to be behind HA proxy. That way we can add more WordPresses to scale. So I did that, and then Juju expose HA proxy is basically open the port and let this be ready. We make you do that explicitly so that you're not serving things on the internet without being prepared. And then you do Juju status and you get the Amazon link, and then you paste that in your browser and you have WordPress, and you can just start configuring it right there. So we did that, and this is how it ended up looking. So Juju has a bootstrap node. Here's HA proxy, here's MySQL, and here's WordPress, which is running Apache at the time. And Juju's just bootstrap mode. It's basically its job to sit there to coordinate everything. WordPress job is to be a blog. MySQL's job is to be a database. And HA proxy, if we get more WordPresses, would be to load them. Sounded awesome, right? I was ready to crack a beer open, but I totally boned it. What happened was I didn't realize how basic the charm was. It was basically apt-get install WordPress. Anyone here ever tried to scale WordPress before? Okay. So for the average person, my personal blog, this would have been fine. For a site like OMG Ubuntu, not so much. So we launched 4 of these as M1 mediums, had the HA proxy, grabbed it, flipped DNS, the whole thing exploded, right? It didn't even work, errors everywhere, so we switched it back and had no idea what was going on. How could this happen? How could his one little server, is only a little quad core, how could it possibly have, outperformed this? So I panicked, and I said, well, we'll figure it out. So I relaunched the whole thing with extra larges, which cost about $2 an hour per each one, which comes out to $83 a day, which comes to $3,500 a month. So congratulations, Joey, you had your 199-pound normal hosting bill, and welcome to the cloud, right? And this is everyone's worst cloud nightmare, right? I know my hardware is kind of horrible or limited. I can't scale, but I know I will never, run into a situation like this. So what had happened? WordPress charm was too basic. We didn't use extra larges. Untested in real life, the charm is just basically apt installed. And while that really meets, the default need of doing sane stuff, it kind of was holding us back. I need a real expert because I didn't know anything about this stuff. So I blogged about it, and immediately Brandon stepped up, and he was like, I do really, really high performance WordPress and Drupal. And I said, well, how big, how fast? He's like, have you ever heard of the Grammys? And I said, okay, you're on board. So he showed up and he was like, dude, I've got this set up with 2 smalls. I can push a lot of data. So I linked him up with Marco. Meanwhile, Marco's doing a lot of work trying to get us out of this financial mess I had gotten us into. Well, I wrote my resignation letter to Mark. And, he's like, dude, we'll do it with Nginx. I can have this auto load balancing setup, whatever. So while he was doing all this kind of prototyping work on how we would do that, Marco was iterating with Juju. So what he did is he forked the WordPress charm, and he called it the WordPress OMG charm. So in here, we started doing things like automatically push backups to S3, so that when you do a new live deploy, it'll automatically grab that. What are the other things you did?
We added tuning to PHP, so we added things like APC caching and opcode caching, caching in WordPress, things to help reduce the load of WordPress in the server.
Right. So what he would do is, as he had this charm locally using LXC, he was able to basically start working on the charm. The great thing about Juju is that, yeah, thanks, Clint. That's exactly what happened. The great thing about this is, while the meter was running, the site was up. So that gave us some time to really start to work. The great thing about Juju is that using LXC containers, you can prototype on your laptop or on your desktop the exact same way you would deploy it to the cloud.
Just don't point
What kind of container did you say that was?
LXC. Yeah.
Does everybody know what that is?
It's like a chain root. Anybody familiar with
it's in
that?
between like a chroot and
And a full VM.
a VM.
Yeah.
They're very fast and very awesome.
But they're not totally contained, so they're only made for local testing.
Right. But it allows you to basically pretend your laptop is a cloud. And for this is good because when you're doing real non-firefighting stuff, you can prototype on your laptop and your bare metal without spending money in the cloud. So we finally got Brandon's first cut in of his stuff. Marco integrated it all while he was doing things like taking care of backups and getting the data up there. And we cut it down to 3 nodes, 3 mediums. So what we did instead is, instead of HA proxy, Brandon's setup uses Nginx in a way that we don't need HA proxy. You just add another node, and it talks to the other Nginx ones, and then they all auto-load balancing. That's awesome, because that saves us money, one makes sense. And it also scales way more than what we had before. I happen to know a guy who's really good at MySQL named Clint. Went in there, tuned that a little bit. What's really great is as we're doing these, or putting these fixes back in the charms, which means all the work that we would have normally been wasting can automatically help the Ubuntu community. So, all right, that got us down to 3 mediums. That's $372 a month. That's starting to look like a more sane hosting. However, Brandon wasn't done. So he kept iterating, and we did this over the course of weeks. Now that the site was up and running and not so expensive, it gave us some time to do more optimizations. This gave us some time to research which one of the half-finished WordPress caching modules would fail us the least, things like that. So, we could iterate and...
Or in the coolest way.
Yeah, and we set up staging.omg.ubuntu.com that we use the exact same commands in real life so that we can practice over and over, and we were ready to go. We would deploy, just change the environment variable, deploy it to the production site. So that was really good. So we kept doing that. Juju upgrade charm, WordPress OMG, magic happens. It takes about, what, 7 minutes? Most of it is like doing the backup.
Right, so the initial deployment takes several minutes because that's download a very large database from S3, but subsequent upgrades are very quick because it's just replacing files and updating and re-executing hooks. The database is already in place, so it's rather quick considering.
And we've actually cut that down.
So
now.
we were good, except
It's
now
what,
we can get
75
down
megs now?
we could
We
now
just
get
haven't
down to
tried it.
small. So we had one MySQL, and then a Juju Bootstrap mode, which actually ended up cheating to save him money and moving it onto here, right? And then the WordPress Nginx. So this release, OMG was famous for blowing up. How many how many of these were we running, and how much were we pushing here?
Were we doing 4 then?
At peak, we had, I think, 5 or 6.
Yes,
Yes.
6 webheads at peak, because that was a release, right?
Yeah.
A release day?
Yeah.
we had 6 small webheads, and then those 2 put together.
Right.
And and it was pushing, what was it, 42 megs a second from each node out, and oh man, I really don't remember.
Remember, this is all text because we were serving the images from S3 themselves.
Yeah, there
He
wasn't.
was pushing. At the end, I was like, dude, your site is not small.
Yeah, he was maxing the network cards out on each of the nodes.
Yeah.
That's what was holding it back. It wasn't CPU, it wasn't anything else.
Right.
It was the network card wasn't going to push any more data out the card or out of the interface.
And now this is what we got him down to. Our budget was $360 a month, which was his old bill. So one of the great things about the cloud is when you're paying for every little, piece of bandwidth and things like that, it forces you to be more efficient. Think about things like hot linking and bad things he was doing in the site. So for real production websites that are based on load time and ad performance and things like that, this kind of hyper optimization is really like what the DevOps thing is good at. What makes me the proud of this the most is we haven't, we're working on it. We can talk about that later. We're working on it, but we can put this in, this will actually end up being the WordPress charm in the charm store, which means that you could run at this level of scale if you wanted to.
I have a question here. You mentioned several optimizations that you did to the original charm and so on.
Sure.
How many of these optimizations are like fixed in this charm, or are they exposed via set config parameters and stuff like that?
Most of them are set config or set, but they are generic enough to where they wouldn't really be a config option. Because we do things like micro caching, where it's a 1 second cache. You don't want to change that to make it, a 5-minute cache or 15-minute cache, because that would defeat the purpose of the micro cache. And things like a reverse proxy, where you're running the 80 for your regular server and 80 on your other server. You don't want to change the port. It's pretty cut and dry stuff. The few things that you would maybe want to change are config options. He hooks that
So
up.
because this is a very specialized case in that not many people run WordPress at this size scale, or if they do, they have a whole team managing it. For the changes that we're putting back into the stock WordPress charm store one is things that will benefit both users but won't hinder them in their pursuit of deploying a log. So we're taking the best of the charm that's good enough for people to deploy normally, but we'll be able to scale if they have to without having it so much overhead that you're running no longer a stock WordPress, you're doing something out of the box that would break the normal process of WordPress.
Because there's a point in some optimizations that you do, in some way you do reverse proxies and this and that, or whatever,
that's okay.
you have to do special things. Well, we're taking the stuff that will make it run as best as it can, but you can still run a stock block Drupal
but for
or
example,
WordPress
MySQL.
and never have to worry about it. Correct.
Like the MySQL configuration for like how much memory it's going to use and so on.
Yeah, and that's actually Clint. He's here on chat. If he's still listening, he's a WordPress whiz. I mean, not the WordPress whiz, the MySQL whiz.
But with this setup here,
More
we're
about that.
using the charm store MySQL. We didn't make any modifications to MySQL to run WordPress here.
Right.
So what you deploy in the charm store right now is what OMG Ubuntu is using for their MySQL backends.
Right.
Can you write your charm to just pass in some parameters to do that tuning?
Sure, and we do
That's a config.
we do for a few things like the S3 bucket name, the credentials for for Amazon, There's two
Well,
or three
and
other.
MySQL has a specific tuning option that click
Right.
there you switch
Yeah,
between.
okay, yeah, that's what I mean.
Yeah, the tuning level, and there's one or two other little
Yeah,
things I can't think of.
I don't mean like exposing the whole configuration file
Sure.
via
Right. What we do is we want to do what we do with the distro, opinionated decisions that
Yeah.
gives you the best bang for the buck. However, if you want to go that deep, you can branch it and go that deep if you want.
Right.
Exactly.
So now what he does is before he just had one server, and in old school ways you have to scale, that means renting another server or doing this. So now what he does is the time coming up to release, he can just add unit.
Like
In this case he has Brandon and Marco do it, so they went up to 6. Watching the metrics, watching New Relic, all the sexy stuff that he set us up with that I had no idea existed. And then when the traffic goes down, he can remove units, and then everything is fine.
No,
Right?
you
You can
can't.
go down to two nodes again. You only pay what you use, which is really great.
And
Of course, every time we figure out something cool, we can, every time we do something cool, we can just upgrade the charm, and then it goes up. Yes, sir.
Would it be possible to write a Juju charm where you could have a parameter of an actual configuration file and just
Absolutely.
upload that? And
Sure.
Yeah, in fact, for the node ones, you
that-
add
that
your
complete-
applications config YAML. That's how we
Yep.
pull it.
Yep.
So,
And I don't know if you can read this over here. Clint's actually got some of the MySQL ones up on the screen.
yeah.
When you add a unit, it basically deploys a new instance and installs WordPress or whatever. How do you guarantee or don't if it's going to be the same WordPress that the other units are running?
That's-
For example,
that's
there was
what
an update to Postgres in the meantime.
That's what the Bootstrap node keeps track of. It keeps track of, because there's a revision file, which probably hasn't configured the file structure yet. There's a revision file in there, and it's on 55.
Well,
right?
so you're asking how do you make sure that the same version
Yeah,
of
because I
WordPress
assume at some point it runs
So it
like
keeps
get
that
install
by branch.
stuff.
Yeah.
Well,
Well,
it keeps that on the Bootstrap node.
Well, no, it doesn't
Yes.
actually, because we fetch the WordPress upstream. We get the latest tarball. So we can't actually guarantee that the same will be running on both nodes, but it doesn't matter because the only thing the nodes are aware of are each other and the addresses for each other for load balancing. Each WordPress has its own set of plugins that are installed. So when OMG Ubuntu deploys, we put all this custom theme files in place, and we put all this custom plugins in place. So yes, you could run to an instance where you have WordPress 3.1 and 3.1.1 running on 2 nodes. That may
They
occur,
should work, but yeah, you
it will work because each is isolated in fact, and since WordPress has been committed to full backwards compatibility with every release, it's not as much of a worry, and then you can always walk into the admin panel for each individual node and upgrade each individual that you had to. And as well, when you run an upgrade charm, if there's already WordPress installed in there, it'll always update the latest if a latest release isn't another release available.
like
So-
that get upgrade.
Yes. So if you had to, you could.
So does the upgrade charm command, it doesn't actually remove and replace the instances?
No. It actually is a whole separate hook. So you can add whatever instructions you want. Typically, charms just source the install hook again, as all hooks are item potent. So the same results happen every time. Most of them just say that, they have to be in the charm store then.
Right.
Yeah, and see, like Clint's saying here, the charm could lock to a single version, and it actually stores the data of what revision it is. That's why it stores the revision data. On the S3 data instance, if you look whenever it's just poking there sometime, it has like, say 55, I was talking about 55, it'll have OMG WordPress-55 in there, and it'll be up 28, 29 meg, the same size as your charm. That's actually TarGZ, even though it doesn't have the TarGZ name on it. And of each time that you've deployed it, or a charm upgraded it actually keeps a copy, and that's a cached copy, so it doesn't even pull it. As long as you're not upgrading, you're just adding a node, it'll actually just pull it from the bucket and throw it out there.
So it depends on how you code the hook. The hook can be either locked into a version, or always use the latest from upstream, or always use the archive.
Or use both and have an option.
And yeah, the config option. Like
Right, and
for
then
PHP.
default to the same.
Also modified.
So a couple of questions from someone who's brand new.
So you could actually select the version.
It can be installed to a private cloud.
Yes.
And then is there anything built into Juju that can go ahead and say, okay, my private cloud can scale to 4 of these, but after that I need you to go up to AWS and start balancing?
That would be awesome, and we definitely want to do that, but not right now.
Future.
Scale out to the public cloud from private. Hybrid cloud.
Oh yeah, that's actually probably possible to just take a little
It's on the roadmap.
a little forethought, yeah.
Is the remove unit command like smart enough to delete the older version ones first, or?
So what the remove unit does is it actually it basically destroys that individual unit,
Right.
and so it'll remove the charm from there, but the machine stays running. So
and you
it's
actually
there for provisioning.
And you actually specify, this is actually just a tiny bit wrong here, because it would be remove unit, oh my god, WordPress /05, whatever, because on the remove, you have to actually specify the actual, which one. You don't just tell it to remove it. Add, you add one. Remove, you actually have to specify which one.
So there is no generic, like, replace this unit or give me a new one and delete the oldest 3 or things like that?
Right, you have to remove them.
Not really. I mean, you could probably pragmatically do it because they're numbered and all that, but there's nothing, out of the box.
So you said it doesn't destroy the instance? So the instance
No.
is still running?
The instance still runs on Amazon, just because of the lag time between starting an instance. You have to and also for data safety, the data still remains on there. So you can
you can't
destroy a service
accidentally.
and log into the machine directly and then copy the service off. But there's a second command in Juju terminate machine, which actually destroys the machine. So the idea is both data safety as well as provisioning times. It takes a while for Amazon to sometimes respond to actually start a machine. So if you deploy with the machine not being used, it'll use that machine to do the next deployment.
Oh, okay, so the unit is removed and let's say, oh, I need to add another one.
It'll just reuse that unit again. But it'll also copy the latest version of the charm on there. It'll redo this whole setup again. But the data stays the same.
But
Yes,
it doesn't remove the old data either, though. It just does it over it, so you kind of got to be careful with it.
Well, it'll add, the charm is removed, but the actual data that was installed during the charm is still on.
Right.
That's not removed, unless you explicitly say it to be removed.
Right,
So of course, you use the work in progress, so it can get better and do some of the things maybe you'd like it to do.
Oh, absolutely.
Oh yeah, it's a definitely a moving target. I mean, even since
We started this charm, it's changed many times,
Right.
I second his opinion, you should have version on production, you don't want to always go to the latest version.
well,
Right. Well, what I tell
You have to actually specifically tell it.
and you can always host
Yeah.
your own charms, and you can have your strictest policy on.
Right.
Actually, the charm
Yeah,
is open
there's
source.
private
You can run your own internal.
And that sounds complicated, but all the difference is you check out the Visa repository, and you change this command right here to say repository equals dot space local : that's it. That's it. So you change the command after you did a checkout. It's not all that complicated.
All right. So moving on. Any more questions before I move on? Yes, Juan.
Nothing.
Okay. Yes, sir. Neil.
Well, so just in terms of stability, I mean, you
Right.
emphasized how right now it's, you can change all the time, you've been updating these
Right.
things. Is there a plan to move to, here's the stable one, and if you really want to...
So I'm going to get to this in the next slide.
go right
Yeah. That and Clint fights tooth and nail to make sure that there is now. It wasn't.
We actually have sessions this week to talk about those policies.
Right.
So this is why we call it DevOps Still. And what makes it exciting for me is that, although I could have done all the research to learn Nginx and stuff, why? When this dude just shared it with me, and then Marco integrated it and did all this great work. So every Ubuntu user can now deploy like this. This is the beginning. I mean, this is very simple. The WordPress one is simple. I can't wait to see what happens when we start to do complicated things like Hadoop. And I was telling Josh Burkus, I was like, wouldn't it be great if we had a Postgres charm that was like the Josh Burkus super charm? And we can totally do that. We can totally do that because the charm store doesn't freeze. And the charm store has basically built-in PPAs. So if next year or 2 years from now, there is a better way to deploy WordPress. We can upgrade the charm, and the charm store is supported for the life of that release. This is really great because we love the archive because it's really stable, but at some point, especially later on in the LTS's life, you're like, okay, I'm gonna have to suck it up and add that PPA. But if that's the way the community's doing it, and there's a bunch of different ones, we're just gonna basically let people do whatever they want in their namespaces. But the actual charm store, those will be heavily peer reviewed, and we're basically going to cross that bridge when we get there. But a lot of it is basically allowing people what they want to do, but we have policies like you can't do bad things, just the same thing that we do with just any Ubuntu contribution.
And you kind of think about it like a rolling release for just selected packages. You get all the goodness of the LTS, but then you can take these 3 packages or 4 packages and let them roll and release, through the life. Right.
So we already have 75 charms. We have 10 more coming as part of the charm contest. If you think there's something awesome that runs in the cloud somewhere and you want to do it, feel free to just do it.
Is that Steam logo in there?
Marco, what does Steam do?
You guys didn't know
So
Steam was coming to
This is actually awesome.
So Steam is a huge gaming platform that provides, it's basically like a,
Does anybody
it's basically
not
the
know about
it's the Ubuntu software center for games on Windows and Macintosh. So they have Valve, the company that created such classics as Half-Life 2, Team Fortress, and Counter-Strike, they are the company behind Steam. And so what you can do is you can actually run these game servers on Linux machines. So you can run a Team Fortress 2 server, you can run a Counter-Strike server, or a wide variety. I think there's something around the number of 23 to 30 official servers you can run through the Steam client. So what the Steam charm does is it allows you to deploy any number one of those servers using the Steam charm. So it's basically deploy Steam and then Juju set Steam game equals TF2. And then you have a TF2 server running that you can start playing with configuration values for and such.
And we also have Minecraft.
And then you can set other
Game
Steam
server
on your
hosting
desktop.
company out of the
How many
box.
people, like, how many times have you had a friend who like wants to like get Minecraft up and running, and you spend like the first half hour trying to explain like what version of Java they need to get, or you can just say Juju deploy.
All my friends are not teenagers.
Yeah. Mark, how come is that OpenStack there? Yeah, actually in the cloud. Yes.
Yeah. You can build a cloud inside of a cloud.
Yeah. So the OpenStack, it's kind of like what's that movie with Leonardo DiCaprio?
It's the dev
It's like
stack.
Inception.
Have you
So
seen the
use
dev
Juju.
stack?
Use Juju. This is how complicated OpenStack is. It has like what 19 terms.
Adam will be Adam's making those, but
Okay. Yeah.
a few.
So use Juju. Use Juju to deploy OpenStack, and then Mass goes to. We'll actually have a demo of this running. So you do Juju deploy all your OpenStack stuff. It talks to Mass. Mass starts turning the machines on, and they physically just start.
And they put headphones
And then
with
they
the
say,
music
you're going to be
on.
Nova, you're going to be Glance, you're going to be the web UI, you're going to do this. And then they'll sit there. We got that down to about 11 minutes. No one else is doing that. And then you wait, and once you get it up and running, you'll say Juju deploy, blah, blah, blah. And then you'll take whatever charm you have and then run that on top of the OpenStack. So
it's very
Well, and there's also one.
Eight charts for core OpenStack.
That was Clint saying that,
Yeah,
What's that?
yeah. There's for.
Oh, we're down to 8. Okay.
8 charms.
Getting better.
Well, and there's one of them that one of the charms for the dev stack in there that like does it all on one box.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you can take and put a whole OpenStack on one box.
Okay.
Why does it require Java? When I installed it just now, Juju.
What?
What?
It
Java
shouldn't.
stuff
It
in
pulls some.
JDK.
It's pure
I'm following
Python.
the example.
Which example?
Yeah. let me
Whoa.
figure out.
Someone's throwing away the phrase. Yes, sir.
So you have to get installed Juju.
Yeah.
So you don't need to use NAS.
We don't need to use what?
NAS.
Oh, that.
The way we're doing it uses Mass. Yeah. Right?
So that means I'll clean your sheet, whatever.
Yeah.
We're using NAS to deliver this type of server.
Right.
Just make things simple. Requirement? No. It's just what we're doing because it seems to be straightforward. Now the stack of boxes, we use NAS and just deploy, and it'd be like one shot, you have your own.
Yeah, you set it up for a local.
Would it be terribly different for like a small
Wait,
setup?
whoa, can we get one conversation?
Yeah, like a small setup, like if I want to set up like a 2-node stack installation.
I think the minimum you need is like 6. What's the minimum for OpenStack, Clint?
Well, there's no fixed node.
Oh, that's right.
for the local provider.
Yeah, and I didn't realize he was doing a whole OpenStack. I thought
Well, the
he was just
example
doing code.
showed installing a bunch of those.
Okay, okay,
And we gotta fix that 3D thing with the network. That's.
okay. So, yes.
So before you said that you merged the Bootstrap node into MySQL, I think.
Yes.
That's not how Juju works, right? You have to have the Bootstrap node and then all the services are deployed extra. So was this like a hack you did?
That was a hack.
Well, it's not really a hack. It's a valid way to deploy it. Otherwise, Bootstrap just sits there and does nothing, and you can deploy multiple charms on the same machine. So we kind of that same idea. We said, okay, well, Bootstrap's going to sit there and do virtually nothing, but occasionally ping services. So put MySQL in there as well. So you can
did
put.
you do that with Juju? Like-
Yes, we did that with Juju.
Because there's no collocation right now, is there?
Yeah.
No, you can.
Collocation knows subordinates, I guess.
Yeah.
Well, the subordinates is also.
subordinates. You can actually.
It is in the term of how we did it. It is a semi-hackish, but it was all done through Juju. So you can define a constraint where a charm deploys, and we said deploy this to local, which happens to be the Bootstrap node. So
And
in a sense, it was a way for us to cut down cost, and anyone can run that same command the way we had.
And see, everybody keeps saying it's hacky. It's only hacky in the sense that it's not documented. It's perfectly valid. It's write straight commands. No, it's perfectly valid. It's write straight commands, and it doesn't hurt anything. You know.
So, yes.
Mark,
So
you
hot.
had a question?
Real quick, can I terminate the bootstrap instance?
Can you what? Yeah, you
From AWS?
destroy the environment.
Once your environment stays running.
Yes.
What's that?
So
No,
we
your
have-
environment.
Trying to be
Bye-bye.
cheap, we've tried suspending that instance, and I think Clint got it running. It ran like it kept running, but it's like it's kind of scared. That's where Zookeeper runs and keeps track of everything.
Yeah, but like if I terminate it, then I want to do some more Juju stuff.
Oh, you're you're screwed in.
You're screwed.
Yeah.
There is a section for high availability in Juju where you can have multiple bootstraps. Or
Yeah.
I've heard some people say, why isn't every node, have a,
Whatever.
But no, currently right now and we know that sucks for a lot of people.
So it doesn't
Yeah, but here's a solution for that.
No,
it doesn't
the
handle
bootstrap
bootstrap.
going.
That's another note, like one of your workers.
It'll pull another one up. In fact, he blew one away intentionally.
Any other machine. So if in AWS you log in and you terminate a machine deployed by Juju, the Bootstrap node will notice that and just spin up another node to replace it. So it has, as long as the Bootstrap stays intact, the environment will keep recreating itself until it's target intent, until it can.
Yeah, Stan,
dependencies, yes.
So as Clint
I think
says, this is why you don't want to get rid of your bootstrap.
Yeah.
How much time do I have left?
Around 12 minutes.
Okay. All right. So basically close out, and then we'll go over to more pure Q&A. Does your project run on the cloud? Come talk to us. I think the biggest story that I've been trying to tell people. So I was surfing Hacker News, and I saw the announcement of an awesome new web-based IRC client. It was called Subway, which this man charmed for us here. And it was getting a lot of traffic, and it's pretty sexy. It uses like Node and Mongo, and just not the typical thing that a lot of people had experience with. And they were getting a lot of attention. They were ready to go, and I went to the IRC channel, and all it was for the first 4 hours of their launch was people complaining about, hey, can I get Mongo up and running? And, hey, someone help figure this out. What I'm trying to convince projects to say, if you have a charm and you make it that easy, that first 3 hours should be people being excited about your project. It should be people saying, dude, how can I get involved and fix this? Not, what's this Mongo thing? I've never heard of it. So his charm, he makes it really simple. He doesn't even use the Mongo charm. In just one charm, you do Subway. It's literally 3 commands, and then you're logging in using it. So that's the story I want to tell. I want upstream projects to realize that they can remove a lot of the complexity. The whole idea of having deployment scripts and stuff on pastebins and on GitHub, we can take all of that stuff for everything and shove it in a store so that it comes as part of the OS.
What do you see the role of Juju for non-public software, right? Software.
So Juju doesn't really care. So most of the charms are open, but Juju we don't really care. So the Steam one just pulls a binary blob and does that.
Yeah,
if you want to roll that way, that's cool.
Yeah, even the hooks can be like the install hook. It can just be a C++ compiled binary called install. As long as it's
include your binary in the charm, like /bin or something.
Right.
You want people who have their own current, private software they're running on private clouds.
Sure, and we even support it now by just doing -- repository and you telling it where the repository
If
is.
they're consuming it, it's helping them, and they feel like they don't want to share that. That's fine.
The default charm store, defaults to the charm store, but that you're not tied to it.
Also maybe I have my own list of software that I have my own deployments for. I could charmify them and then maybe use your charm for MongoDB rather than worrying about it.
Yep.
Exactly.
Yeah, I do exactly that.
You can
Mine
use
from my website. Yeah, mine from my personal website, BrandonHoltzclaw.com, I don't publish that anywhere, but I use the regular MySQL charm and and this and that.
Yeah.
But my website charm isn't, and I know Marco's got some other ones for stuff he does the same way.
Yeah. So here's where you get information: launchpad.net.juju. We're also on GitHub. We're trying to figure out how to make that two-way thing work.
Sync.
Yeah, going. So if you want to work on GitHub, you can. It's github.com/charms. We'll have sessions on how we can help make that easy for people. Hash Juju on Freenode. The team is always available to give people virtual charm stores or physical charm stores if we're available. So if you have a team in Ubuntu, or you have 3 or 4 people at work that want to dial in and talk to one of us, and we can go as deep as you want. We have people who...
It even works on OS X.
Yeah, it even works on OS X. We have an OS X client. So those of you who attend OSCON will actually like it. You only got my OSCON? But yeah, we're willing to bend over backwards to help people get their charms reviewed and in the store. Yes, sir.
What does it do locally on OS 10 if not LXC?
You don't get LXC on OS 10. You have to move to Ubuntu.
Yeah, you don't. There's no local instances on OS 10. It's only
That's the
deployed.
hook, baby.
So, again, from a sysadmin point, if I'm sitting in a smaller environment, I can still use Juju even though I'm not planning to scale it to something the size of the M?
Sure. So it's like AdGet for the cloud, except instead of the one server, you're doing it for multiple servers.
Yeah, my website gets 1,000 hits or less a day. It runs on one instance total. I do it because it's easy, you know.
But I mean, back to local, so I'm not out in the cloud. You said I could run it locally.
Yeah,
but LXC locally, you don't want to point a website at that. You would want to run like
what you want to do is
it's
you
like
want,
an orchestra
you want
server
an
or something.
OpenStack,
Yeah,
mini
or
cloud,
OpenStack.
a seed
Cloud
cloud.
OpenStack.
Yeah, that's what you want.
What do you call that if not local?
Private cloud.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. If it's not on your laptop, but not. Yeah.
Does currently Juju only create a bunch of servers with all the charms you have?
Yep.
Yes.
And only ever plans to.
And only ever plans to?
Yep.
That's not true.
I mean,
All the charms would ever have to be rewritten.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying? It can't. We're not physically limiting it from running on other operating systems, but Ubuntu is focused on doing it in Ubuntu. If you have cloud in it, and Clint will finally someday be a DD. It took him a lot longer than he thought.
He's actually a DD
There's
now.
probably nothing
He got it.
cloud in it. Oh, he got it.
Yeah,
So,
he's a DD. Congrats.
for him, it's just a time thing to get that into that. As far as other distributions, or we're more than welcome to take patches and stuff, but we're concentrating on.
But you also got to remember too, if it does run on even Debian, another distribution, any distribution, no matter how small it is, fork or whatever, every single charm is written for Ubuntu.
It's not an explicit goal for us to make generic things.
And they will likely break on pretty much anything else.
That's on the development side, right? You can deploy.
If you port Juju to anything else, every charm in the charm store would have to be rewritten for that client.
Can I write a charm designed for an OS?
Certainly.
Sure.
And then
As long as that OS supported the Juju agent and had cloud in it and everything required to run Juju.
Right.
So if you went out and took the Juju source, which is mostly all Python now, and packaged it for RPM and deployed it on Red Hat or CentOS, you could write charms that specifically deployed to Red Hat, and that's fine. You can use the other charms.
Right.
There's nothing stopping you from doing that.
yeah, other Linuxes aren't nearly as interesting here as stuff that has to run on non-Linux servers.
Like I said, don't really care.
Yeah.
I wanted WordPress, right? I didn't care about the AMI number either. I didn't care whether I picked 62 or 64-bit or 32-bit. I just wanted WordPress, and I got WordPress in like 4 commands.
That's fine.
And I don't mean that as a slight to people who prefer other distributions.
Well, and
I'm saying
also it's
OS
cloud.
not caring that much.
Well, and honestly, it's cloud orchestration. Anything that is going to need Windows that isn't going to want to scale anyway, you're not going to be able to scale it.
Well, like those Steam servers, for instance, some of those games only have Windows servers.
Well, no, actually,
Not anymore.
all the Steam games that are in the Steam binary for Linux are all Linux supported games.
Yeah.
Yes.
So,
There are plenty of Steam games that still have Windows servers.
well, yes, in that case, you would have to get the Windows client, Windows server. So
and
you could
they
make that.
naturally
But they're
don't
working
scale already.
they're working on
We
porting.
have to port it. Learn this.
Are there any charms that, in addition to create EC2 instances, they also create S3 instances or storage or things like that? Is there any?
Yeah, it can.
Trying to create buckets and stuff.
Right.
Yeah, so how does that work? How do buckets fit into?
There's a whole API behind it. I mean, there's all kind of stuff.
Juju doesn't.
This isn't.
And Clint, correct me if I'm wrong, but
This isn't all
Juju
advanced
does
or
not
what.
have any way to abstract the storage infrastructure for things. So right now, if you wanted a charm to use S3, you would have to explicitly say use the S3 tool or S3 CMD to copy files to that bucket. So Juju, and unless I'm wrong,
You're
Yeah, so there is no way, the Juju provider doesn't have an abstraction for storage as we do for EC2 currently, or for the compute part process of it. And I'm sure eventually we'll get there so that charms can just say, create bucket, and depending on the provider, it'll create a bucket in their storage solution. But right now it doesn't. Or exactly, yeah. So right now there currently is a way from inside of a charm to do that unless you explicitly tie yourself to a provider.
Yeah, and in that case, you create what you just said there. You would create an interface, like a storage interface, and then add that. And when you add relations, it would tell it where the interface is, and its interface is a mounted bucket or something similar to that.
If I were able to specify the image, it's like, oh, that's my limited to a particular image, like say, yeah, we'll do server. But if I can specify another AMI, it would be the
You can
potentially do that just by adding that little feature.
Sure, that's what I'm saying. You can now. You could physically do it now, but I'm telling you, it's gonna break. I mean,
Well, we're also-
honestly, it really will. But it's Python, and it's probably not that much of a change. It's just these core guys that are coding it, man. The guys that are coding it, I can guarantee, will accept patches, won't block anything, but they're not gonna do it. You know what I mean?
Okay. All right. Real quick, if you're here at UDS, especially those of you that have like your own, like I said, carrying around your own shell scripts and Perl scripts or whatever that you've been carrying around that does these kind of deployments, you probably have most of the charm already. So the last day we do this, so you have 2 days. If you can get a charm submitted, and there's information here just on cloud.ubuntu.com. We're giving away 3 Dell XPS 13s, the one Mark talked about this morning. They're really sexy, 4 gigs of RAM, SSD, they run a lot of containers. So far we have 13 entries, so if you want to do that, then just feel free to enter the contest, and then we'll be giving those away on Friday as part of the Lightning Talks. As far as, since I'm the nicest guy in the world, even if you're not here and you write a charm, I will send you a highly coveted Ubuntu plastic mug, the expensive one, not the glass one. And a Juju t-shirt. So even if you are mildly interested and you end up getting a charm and you get it in the store, I'll send you some swag and it'll be cool. So anything that helps contributing to make charms better for people, that makes it easier, is like totally awesome to me.
And if it's any time during this week, somebody gets stuck.
Oh yeah. So at any time, if you need help, room 205. We have all of these guys just hanging out there, willing to do any kind of tutoring or
anywhere.
If you're missing some kind of concept that you need to have explained to you and stuff, they'd be more than happy to take it. And they'll be there all week from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. So.
Come up. Whenever you guys come up and look at this.
Is that in England? Oh no, it's something else.
So I guess it's beer time. We're out of time.
Oh, yeah.
It's beer time.
Thank you very much for coming. I appreciate it. Thank you.
It's lagging. Hey.